The Arctic is a land of extremes. Ice stretches as far as the eye can see. Fjords cut deep into granite cliffs. Winds howl across frozen plains, and the sun lingers above the horizon for months before disappearing entirely. Greenland, the world's largest island. An icy frontier has witnessed millennia of human endeavor, from the earliest hunters to daring settlers who defied oceans and frost. Welcome to Thugilan Studio, where we explore the lost and hidden chapters of human history. Today, we journey into a Greenland that is both familiar and mysterious, a land in transition, a crucible of climate, culture, and survival. Here, the Little Ice Age began to bite. Norse settlements teetered on the brink of disappearance, and the Thule Inuit rose to mastery, adapting to the unforgiving Arctic with knowledge passed down through generations. But the story does not stop there. Centuries later, European explorers would return to these icy shores, encountering communities resilient enough to endure what Norse ambition could not. Greenland's frozen past is a story of survival, adaptation, and continuity, a narrative that spans thousands of years and still resonates today. To understand Greenland's transition, we must first step back and see the land through the eyes of those who lived at its edge. For centuries, the island had hosted layers of civilization: the Saqqaq hunters, the Dorset artisans, the bold Norse settlers, and the adaptive Thule Inuit. Each group faced the same challenge: survive in a land where life itself demanded respect, ingenuity, and endurance. But as the 14th century dawned, something changed. A subtle, relentless shift in climate, known today as the Little Ice Age, began to reshape Greenland's environment. Summers shortened, winters lengthened, glaciers crept farther into the fjords. Storms grew fiercer. And for the Norse settlers, who had relied on European-style agriculture and livestock, the consequences were profound. Sound SFX, icy wind gusts, subtle crunch of frost underfoot. The Norse farms, once lush and productive, began to fail. Pastures shrank under frost-hardened soil. Barley and other crops barely survived the shortened summers. Sheep, goats, and cattle struggled, many succumbing to cold and disease. Supplies from Norway became scarce, as treacherous seas delayed or prevented trade for years at a time. Isolation weighed heavily on the settlers, both physically and spiritually. The Thule Inuit, however, faced the same environment with a different philosophy. They did not rely on imported goods or European agricultural methods. Instead, their lives were attuned to the rhythms of the Arctic. Dog sleds carried hunters across the ice. Kayaks allowed stealthy movement over frozen and open waters. Harpoons, tipped with bone or iron, ensured seals and whales could be harvested efficiently. The Thule observed, adapted, and thrived, their culture deeply intertwined with the natural cycles of Greenland. As decades passed, Norse communities began to dwindle. The Western settlement disappeared first, followed by the Eastern settlement. Historians and archaeologists debate the causes: famine, disease, isolation, climatic shifts, and possibly conflict with the Thule Inuit. Yet the evidence suggests that while some may have fled, others simply perished, leaving behind empty homes, ruined churches, and abandoned livestock. Pause, slow, orchestral swell. Meanwhile, the Thule expanded into areas once dominated by Norse settlements. They incorporated Old Norse materials, abandoned tools, structures, and metals into their lives. This continuity, this adaptive reuse, demonstrates a remarkable intelligence, the ability to learn from predecessors, even those who failed, and to thrive where others could not. By the 16th century, Greenland was once again largely a land of Inuit dominance, though European curiosity had begun to stir. Whalers from the Netherlands, Basque sailors, and Danish, Norwegian missionaries began navigating ice-choked seas to reach its coasts. They recorded observations of the Thule people, their hunting techniques, houses, clothing, and oral traditions. These early European accounts also mention the ruins of Norse settlements, often misunderstood but revealing a glimpse into a lost civilization. Sound SFX creaking ship, distant whale called the first Danish-Norwegian attempts at colonization occurred in the 18th century. Missionaries sought to convert the Inuit and document the land. Whalers came seeking profit, explorers arrived, mapping the fjords, glaciers, and mountains. Greenland, once isolated, was gradually being brought into the broader European consciousness. Yet through all this, the Thule Inuit preserved their culture. Traditional hunting methods, art, and storytelling continued. Knowledge passed through generations ensured survival in an environment that had already claimed so many. Greenland's story, long frozen in isolation, was now bridging the ancient past with modern awareness. As the 14th century deepened, the Norse settlements that once dotted Greenland's fjords began to falter. The eastern settlement, larger and older than its western counterpart, was still home to families who had survived generations of frost and famine. Yet the land, once generous, had begun to resist their presence. Summers shortened, glaciers advanced, and the sea, once a source of bounty, became a frozen barrier for months on end. Each farm told a story of struggle. Stone walls, carefully constructed, sheltered families from piercing winds. Churches erected with the labor of devoted communities stood as symbols of faith and resilience. But within these walls, life was a daily negotiation with survival. Sheep grazed on meager pastures. Barley and oats struggled under frost-hardened soil. Livestock weakened. Hunger became an uninvited companion. The Norse had come from lands where summer sun fed rich pastures and trade brought iron, grain, and timber. Here in Greenland, they were isolated. Supplies from Norway were unpredictable, delayed or lost entirely to treacherous seas. Some winters, the storms alone were enough to prevent any ship from reaching the settlement for years. Families huddled in their homes, listening to the wind batter the stone and timber. Knowing that every harsh gust might herald another season of scarcity, yet life went on. Children learned to mend clothing, care for weakened livestock, and prepare food stores for the relentless cold. Fathers carved tools from wood and salvaged metal, while mothers preserved what little grains survived and taught their children to hunt the local wildlife: rabbits, foxes, and even birds. Churches continued to hold services, though attendance dwindled as families migrated south, sought refuge, or succumbed to illness. Historical records, fragments of letters, sagas, and missionary notes hint at the struggles. Some families may have tried to return to Norway, braving the perilous North Atlantic. Others vanished entirely, leaving behind only the remnants of homes and farmland, slowly reclaimed by ice and moss. Archaeologists today uncover their bones, iron nails, and rotting timber, revealing a society teetering on the edge of extinction. Amidst this decline, the Thule Inuit were ascending. Unlike the Norse, their survival strategy was intertwined with the Arctic itself. They did not impose European farming methods on the land. They observed, adapted, and thrived. Semi-subterranean houses, insulated with whalebone and turf, protected families from the harshest winters. Dog sleds transported hunters across ice and snow. Kayaks sliced through icy waters silently, enabling stealth and precision in hunting. The Thule's diet reflected this mastery. Seals, walruses, and whales were primary sources of protein and fat, essential for survival in the extreme cold. Caribou and fish supplemented their meals. Every part of an animal was used: meat for food, bones for tools, skins for clothing, and fat for lamps to light long Arctic nights. Interaction between the declining Norse and rising Thule was sporadic but notable. Evidence suggests occasional trade, perhaps in iron tools or domestic animals. Conflict, too, may have occurred, especially over hunting grounds or scarce resources. Yet the Thule had learned a crucial lesson. Adaptation and respect for the land outweighed rigid adherence to foreign customs. Where Norse settlements faltered, Thule ingenuity flourished. The final years of Norse Greenland remained shrouded in mystery. By the late 15th century, both the eastern and western settlements had disappeared from European records. Some historians argue famine, disease, and climate change as primary causes. Others speculate conflict with Inuit groups, social isolation, or a combination of these factors. Archaeological excavations reveal abandoned churches, farms overtaken by moss, and graves unmarked by surviving descendants, silent testimonies to a vanished people. Yet the story of Greenland was far from over. The Thule Inuit not only survived, but expanded into areas once dominated by Norse settlers. They incorporated abandoned tools and structures into their communities, demonstrating a practical intelligence that ensured survival. Driftwood from previous European trade, iron scraps, and even farm remnants became part of Thule daily life. This continuity of knowledge exemplifies how one culture can inherit and adapt the lessons of another, even as time and climate reshape the land. By the 16th century, Greenland began to re-enter the consciousness of Europeans. Dutch and Basque whalers navigated the ice-choked coasts, recording observations of both the land and its inhabitants. Danish-Norwegian missionaries and explorers followed in the 18th century, seeking to convert, study, and colonize. They encountered thriving Inuit communities whose knowledge of hunting, navigation, and survival in the Arctic surpassed anything the Europeans could muster. The missionaries documented Inuit clothing, shelter, and oral traditions, often marveling at their ingenuity. They observed families navigating the ice, hunting seals and whales, and enduring winters that would have claimed Norse settlers. At the same time, Europeans stumbled upon the ruins of Norse settlements, stone churches, farm foundations, and scattered tools, sparking curiosity, speculation, and eventually systematic archaeological investigation centuries later. By the 16th century, Greenland's icy shores had once again attracted the gaze of European explorers, long after the Norse settlements had vanished. Tales of a distant land with abandoned churches and mysterious ruins persisted in European maps and sailor stories. Whalers from the Netherlands and Basque regions navigated treacherous seas to hunt whales and seals along Greenland's coasts, braving the perilous ice and fierce storms. These early explorers documented what they saw: Inuit communities living in harmony with the Arctic, their sleds and kayaks gliding silently across frozen fjords and icy waters. They marveled at the ingenuity of families who could thrive in an environment where European settlers had failed. They encountered semi-subterranean houses, expertly insulated with whalebone, turf, and stones, built to endure the harsh winters. They watched hunters skillfully wield harpoons and bows, taking down seals and walruses with precision born of centuries of practice. European curiosity soon turned to ambition. The Danish-Norwegian crown, claiming sovereignty over Greenland, dispatched missionaries and settlers to convert the Inuit and establish colonies in the 18th century. These early expeditions were fraught with challenges: navigating ice-choked waters, surviving blizzards, and establishing relations with indigenous communities that had mastered the land long before European arrival. Missionaries recorded meticulous notes on Thule life. They documented diet, clothing, shelter, social structures, and spiritual practices. They marveled at the Inuits' resilience, noting how their communities could survive months without sunlight, with temperatures plummeting far below what Europeans had ever known, while the missionaries sought to impose European religious and social structures. They could not replicate the Inuits' intimate knowledge of the Arctic. Meanwhile, explorers stumbled upon the silent remnants of Norse civilization. The eastern and western settlements, long abandoned, revealed stone church foundations, farm enclosures, and scattered artifacts. Iron tools, nails, fragments of timber, and rotting remnants of domestic structures hinted at a once thriving society now swallowed by ice and time. Europeans were puzzled. How could these settlements built with skill and faith vanish without a trace? Archaeology, centuries later, would provide answers. Excavations revealed patterns in settlement locations, agricultural practices, and diet. Researchers discovered that the Norse were heavily dependent on European-style livestock and crops, which were poorly suited to the Arctic's increasingly harsh climate. Isotopic analysis of bones indicated malnutrition and stress. Burials suggested some violence or conflict, though evidence for Inuit-Norse confrontation remains limited. The Thule, however, continued to thrive. By incorporating Old Norse materials, iron tools, driftwood, and even remnants of abandoned buildings, they exemplified adaptive intelligence. They did not merely survive, they learned from the past. Kayaks, sleds, and harpoons allowed them to exploit marine resources with precision. Seasonal migrations followed the movements of seals, walruses, and whales. Families preserved knowledge orally, passing survival strategies, hunting techniques, and spiritual traditions from one generation to the next. Greenland's story at this time illustrates a profound lesson. Environment shapes culture, and adaptability is the measure of survival. Where the Norse clung to familiar European methods, they struggled. Where the Thule integrated knowledge, observed patterns, and adapted technologies to the land, they prospered. European colonization attempts, though sporadic, began shaping Greenland's modern history. Settlements at Godtheb, modern Nuuk, and Frederiksby, modern Pomiat, became hubs of interaction between Europeans and Inuit. Trade emerged: furs, whale products, and ivory exchanged for iron tools, textiles, and other goods. Missionaries documented not only religious conversions but also invaluable ethnographic data, language, social organization, art, and oral traditions. At the same time, European scientific interest increased. Scholars realized that Greenland's ice preserved a record of human and environmental history. Archaeologists uncovered remnants of Saqqaq and Dorset cultures, along with Norse settlements, creating a layered narrative spanning millennia. Radiocarbon dating and DNA analysis allowed modern researchers to trace population movements and interactions. Genetic studies revealed that the Thule Inuit carried both ancient Arctic lineages and traces of contact with earlier populations, a living bridge to Greenland's distant past. By the 19th century, Greenland became a laboratory for understanding human adaptation, climate change, and resilience. Ice cores provided records of temperature fluctuations. Archaeological sites documented changes in diet, settlement patterns, and technology. The land, once seen as a frozen barrier, became a chronicle of survival, a testament to the ingenuity of humans who dared to endure where others could not. The Inuit maintained continuity in culture and lifestyle. Dog sleds and kayaks remained central to daily life. Hunting practices, knowledge of animal behavior, and seasonal migrations continued much as they had for centuries. Families preserved oral histories recounting tales of the Norse, the Dorset, and even the Saqqaq stories layered over generations like the very ice beneath their feet. Greenland's transition from the vanished Norse settlements to resilient Inuit dominance, and finally, to European rediscovery, offers timeless lessons. It is a narrative of adaptation over rigidity, of observation over imposition, and of survival built on respect for nature's rhythm. The frozen fjords, once silent witnesses to vanished communities, now echo with the endurance and ingenuity of those who survived. As we look back across the centuries, Greenland emerges not just as a land of ice and snow, but as a living archive of human perseverance. Each artifact, ruin, and oral story is a testament to the ability of humans to observe, adapt, and thrive, even in the most extreme environments. At Thugilan Art Studio, we celebrate these lost and enduring civilizations. From the Saqqaq hunters to the Thule masters of the Arctic, from the ambitious Norse settlers to the Europeans who rediscovered Greenland. Greenland is more than ice and rock. Beneath its frozen surface lies a story written in the movements of glaciers, the growth rings of driftwood, and the layers of snow compacted over millennia. For those who lived here, the Thule Inuit, the vanished Norse, and even the forgotten Saqqaq and Dorset peoples, the environment was both adversary and teacher. Survival demanded observation, knowledge, and a constant dialogue with the land. The Little Ice Age, which gripped Greenland between the 14th and 19th centuries, altered this delicate balance. Winters grew longer, summers shorter, and glaciers crept relentlessly down the fjords. Ice cores reveal a drop in average summer temperatures of up to 2 to 3 degrees Celsius. While modest by modern standards, this shift had profound consequences for human survival. Pastures that had once supported sheep and cattle became frostbound. Rivers and fjords that once thawed sufficiently for transport froze for months. Storms intensified, often sweeping through settlements without warning. For the Thule, these changes were challenges, not calamities. Seasonal hunting patterns adapted. Communities shifted inland or along new coastal areas as ice conditions dictated. Sled dogs became even more critical, hauling supplies, transporting families, and scouting across frozen plains. Kayaks, perfected over generations, allowed hunters to traverse icy waters, reaching seals and whales that now migrated along new routes dictated by the shifting climate. Daily life was a rhythm attuned to the seasons. Men ventured out on hunting trips, navigating treacherous ice flows with a deep understanding of wind, snow, and currents. Women maintained households, preserved food, prepared skins and furs for clothing, and taught children the knowledge essential for survival. Every action was purposeful. Every tool, skin, and bone was used to its fullest potential. Nothing was wasted, and everything carried the imprint of generations of Arctic wisdom. Meanwhile, abandoned Norse settlements stood as silent monuments to human ambition constrained by environment. Stone foundations, churches, and farmsteads slowly succumbed to moss, lichen, and snow. Archaeological studies reveal livestock bones with signs of malnutrition. Grain stores depleted or destroyed, and tools scattered, evidence of desperation and gradual decline. Oral traditions among the Inuit occasionally referenced the pale-skinned settlers who had come and gone, leaving behind mysterious buildings and tools. Ice cores provide a record of these centuries, tracing volcanic eruptions, temperature shifts, and atmospheric changes. Layers of ash and frost tell a story of survival under duress. In combination with dendrochronology, the study of driftwood and preserved timber, scientists reconstruct a Greenland of fluctuating fortunes, years of relative warmth interspersed with decades of relentless cold. These climatic oscillations dictated the movement of humans, animals, and even the sea ice itself. Within this frozen environment, the Thule exhibited ingenuity on multiple levels. Tools were multifunctional. Harpoons, tipped with bone or iron, could catch seals, fish, or even smaller whales. Sleds were optimized for terrain and load capacity. Kayaks were not just transportation. They were extensions of the hunter's body, allowing silent, fluid movement across water. Houses were semi-subterranean to retain heat, insulated with turf and whalebone. Their designs evolving with centuries of environmental knowledge. Even social structures reflected adaptation. Families were small and mobile, able to move quickly as hunting conditions shifted. Knowledge was passed orally through stories, songs, and ritual. Spiritual traditions intertwined with practical survival. Rituals marked hunting seasons, seasonal migrations, and the observation of weather patterns. This integration of environment, culture, and survival created a society resilient enough to endure the extremes that had claimed the Norse. Archaeologists examining abandoned Norse settlements often marvel at the contrast. Norse reliance on European agriculture and livestock had proven a vulnerability. The Thule, with a culture honed to the Arctic's demands, succeeded where rigid European practices failed. Even when incorporating Norse tools and iron, their strategies remained fundamentally adapted to the land. Greenland became a canvas, illustrating the principles of survival, flexibility, observation, and respect for environmental limits. European visitors in the 17th and 18th centuries recorded these observations with growing admiration. Danish-Norwegian missionaries and traders noted the Thule's diet, clothing, and seasonal migrations. They documented the construction of sleds, the use of dogs in transport, and the careful observation of animal behavior. These early records provide modern historians with invaluable insight into a society that had mastered a land that had repelled others, even as Europeans began permanent settlements along Greenland's southwestern coast. The Thule maintained cultural continuity. Its families preserved oral histories, passing knowledge of hunting, navigation, and survival from parent to child. The frozen fjords and ice-choked seas became living classrooms. The lessons of climate adaptation, resource management, and communal cooperation were embedded in every journey across ice or hunt along the fjords. In many ways, Greenland became a microcosm of human adaptation to extreme conditions, where ambition alone could not ensure survival, as the Norse discovered knowledge. Observation and integration with the environment proved decisive. Modern archaeology, genetics, and climatology confirm this. DNA studies reveal lineages connecting the Thule with earlier Arctic populations, demonstrating continuity and adaptation over millennia. Artifacts, from tools to clothing, preserve stories of ingenuity and survival. This intersection of climate, culture, and adaptation offers lessons far beyond Greenland. It is a story about how humans respond to environmental pressures, how knowledge is transmitted across generations, and how resilience emerges not from rigid tradition, but from flexible, intelligent adaptation. Greenland's frozen fjords, abandoned Norse churches, and thriving Thule villages are not just relics. They are chapters in a living story of survival. Imagine waking in a semi-subterranean Thule house as the first light of a pale Arctic dawn seeps through the narrow openings. Outside, frost glints on the snow-covered tundra, and the distant mountains rise like frozen sentinels. A family of hunters prepares for the day, following rhythms dictated by the land, the animals, and the seasons. Inside, the warmth of blubber-fueled lamps flickers across walls lined with skins and tools. Children stir, learning early the skills that will sustain them through lifetimes in this unforgiving land. Mothers tend to the fire, preparing meals from preserved meat and fish, sewing clothing from seal and caribou hides, and instructing younger members in the ways of survival. Fathers check the condition of sled dogs, ensuring they are fed and ready for the long journey ahead. Every action is purposeful. Every object carries significance. Hunting is central to survival. Men and women set out in kayaks or sleds, moving silently across frozen fjords or snow-drifted plains. Harpoons, bows, and spears are their lifelines. They track seals, walruses, and occasionally caribou, reading the ice and wind to anticipate animal movements. Every catch is not just food. Bones become tools, skins, clothing, and fat sustains lamps that light long Arctic nights. The Thule approach to survival is holistic. Houses are carefully constructed to retain heat, insulated with turf and whalebone. Water from melted snow is rationed. Food is preserved using cold storage pits and underground caches, preventing waste during lean months. Even social structures reflect environmental adaptation. Families are small, mobile, and cooperative, able to shift locations as hunting conditions change. Knowledge is passed orally, ensuring that survival skills are ingrained in every generation. Seasons govern every activity. In summer, hunting expands to the coasts. Fish are dried and stored, and boats are maintained for future voyages. In winter, sleds glide over frozen rivers, carrying supplies, people, and information between communities. Rituals and ceremonies mark these transitions, offerings to spirits. Songs recounting past hunts, stories of Norse settlers whose ruins still dot the landscape. The Thule did not merely survive, they thrived, weaving cultural and spiritual life tightly with environmental knowledge. It is in these small daily acts that Greenland's story comes alive. The Thule's ingenuity contrasts sharply with the Norse experience, where the Norse struggled with imported crops, livestock, and rigid traditions. The Thule embraced flexibility, observation, and innovation. This adaptability becomes the thread linking Greenland's ancient past with its modern legacy. As centuries passed, Greenland began to attract renewed European attention. Whalers, traders, and explorers ventured into ice-choked waters during the 17th and 18th centuries, documenting the land and its people. Their journals describe Thule communities with a mixture of fascination and incredulity. Small families thriving in the cold, hunting expertly, navigating frozen seas, and preserving oral histories of vanished Norse settlers. Danish-Norwegian missionaries arrived with the aim of establishing settlements and converting the Inuit to Christianity. They were met with resilience and pragmatism. While some Inuit incorporated European goods such as metal tools and textiles, their core survival strategies, hunting, housing, navigation, communal cooperation, remained rooted in centuries of experience. Missionaries recorded intricate details of daily life, the preparation of food, the construction of homes, and the intricate knowledge of ice, sea, and weather that allowed communities to endure. Simultaneously, Europeans became aware of the ruins left by the Norse. Churches, farmsteads, and scattered tools hinted at a lost civilization. Maps began to depict Greenland's coastlines more accurately, noting the presence of both Inuit communities and abandoned Norse settlements. Scholars and adventurers speculated on the fate of the Norse. Did they integrate with the Inuit? Did they perish in famine? Or did they simply vanish into history? Archaeological excavations centuries later would provide partial answers. Ice cores and environmental studies revealed the subtle but relentless changes in Greenland's climate during this period. Shortened summers, advancing glaciers, and harsh winters contributed to the disappearance of Norse settlements while shaping Inuit strategies for survival. Archaeologists discovered skeletal evidence of malnutrition among Norse livestock and human populations, as well as tools abandoned in haste, indicators of stress, adaptation failure, and eventual disappearance. Meanwhile, the Thule continued to innovate. Tools evolved in response to environmental challenges. Harpoons became more specialized. Kayaks and sleds improved in design and efficiency. Seasonal migrations shifted in response to changes in animal populations and sea ice. Their oral histories preserve stories of Norse ruins, linking past and present, providing cultural continuity in a land where human life depended on memory, observation, and wisdom. This era also marked the first real attempts at European colonization. Settlements like Godzeb modern Nuuk and Frederikshavn modern Pomiat became points of contact between Europeans and Inuit. Trade networks emerged. European goods, including iron tools, cloth, and provisions, were exchanged for furs, whale products, and knowledge of the land. Missionaries documented languages, rituals, and social organization, providing a record that informs our understanding of Greenland's human history to this day. Even as Europeans sought to impose new structures, the Inuit preserved their core culture. Knowledge of hunting, navigation, and environmental adaptation continued to pass from generation to generation. Greenland, once a stage for Norse ambition, had transformed into a laboratory of human resilience, where culture, climate, and adaptation intertwined seamlessly. Greenland's story during this transitional period illustrates a powerful lesson. Success and survival in extreme environments depend not on force or ambition alone, but on observation, adaptation, and respect for nature's rhythms. The Thule mastery of the Arctic demonstrates that ingenuity and flexibility can triumph where rigid traditions fail, and that human communities can endure, evolve, and thrive despite environmental extremes. Every chapter of this frozen land's history reminds us of human courage, creativity, and resilience. If this journey through Greenland's transition fascinates you, like this video, subscribe, and tap the bell icon to continue exploring lost civilizations, frozen frontiers, and the hidden stories of humanity. Share this story with fellow explorers, history enthusiasts, and anyone fascinated by the Arctic's mysteries. Greenland's past is not frozen in time. It lives in the ice, in the stories, in the tools, and in the enduring spirit of those who call this land home. Step into its history, learn from it, remember it,